Welcome to Stuck in the Middle, TTT, Tragedy to Triumph Transformation. This is all about taking the information that we have and applying it to you in your life so that you can be buffaloes, not cowards. We want to keep it raw, real, and uncut. This is for men to improve their relationships and increasing their spiritual values. I'm Ryan Smith, and I'm the host, and I'm with Bunker Weimer. So, Bunker, this is just my humor here, but if I could riddle me this, what is faster than a bullet, stronger than an ox, bigger than a mountain, and sharper than a sword?
One thing,
one word.
attributes. I'm drawing some blanks. That's a tough riddle.
It's a tough one, right? So here's the answer. It's an idea. An idea moves faster than a bullet. It's stronger than an ox, and it can change, if you have a good idea, you can transition an ox to maybe go the way you want it to go rather than the way you thought it did, if you have the right idea. Bigger than a mountain. It can create palaces bigger than a mountain or something. Sharper than a sword. And it's, for example, in communication, someone can, there's so many, I'm thinking of Han Solo or something, but like negotiators, they have a bullet to their head in a movie, but because they transition the idea, they decide not to shoot, pull the trigger or something. And because it's the presenting of an idea that can overpower the physical nature of things. And that is what this is today. And sometimes ideas don't always do everything, but that is what today is about, is giving the ideas. And hopefully these ideas shared today can be sharp enough to cut through maybe the barriers that you're in, and bigger than your obstacles, stronger than what your doubts are, and faster than maybe the growing negativity and hopelessness that may be growing underneath. That these ideas can reboot and transform your life in making the triumphs that you deserve. And so just going forward, and I know this is a lot, but I want to really just set the stage so you know what you're getting here. Today, and for the next 10 episodes, roughly, this will be me and Bunker. We'll be talking, and you have the benefit of us. And we will be selecting a few in about 10 episodes to have you and other viewers like you join this podcast and taking the principles and applying it. And I believe that will be interesting, and it will also create the vicarious learning that I think can happen by doing this. So if you're interested in getting a free therapy, free coaching with the and being vulnerable to share your story with others, please let us know and contact us, and we'd love to help you in your life and make your tragedies turn to triumph. So I'm just looking over my notes here. With that, Bunker, let's jump into it. What is a man? Take it away, and maybe help us, Bunker. Just why did you think of this question maybe in the first place? Where did this come from?
So a few months ago, Matt Walsh, if the listeners are familiar with him, he came out with a documentary titled "What is a Woman?" And he travels around the world, literally posing that question to different cultures, people, different situations, people that were considered highly educated, people who were probably just considered very average, run-of-the-mill. And it was interesting to hear their answers, but it kind of left me thinking a lot about what is a man? How would you define it? Because just as womanhood and what is one has been attacked so much, I feel like it's the same for men. Most shows depict men or the father as kind of like he's dumb, he's unintelligent, he's lazy. And is that really what we think of a man being? And so that's a good question. And I don't know if I have a set answer, but some of the thoughts that I've had, especially from a religious background, was preside, provide, and protect. Those are the first three words that came to mind. That's the role of a man. Now, does the role of a man fit what is a man? I think that's also a good question, and I'm not sure.
Well, say that one more time.
Does the role of the man make, like, is that fitting the identity of a man, or are they two separate things?
Whoa, deep question.
I would say they're somewhat separate, right? Because we have roles, but it's apart from all of what we are, but it is a part of who we are. So something to think about for the audience, I guess, and we could talk about it more.
Deep.
The other thing that I think about a lot that I've addressed in my podcast is that men should think of themselves as stability, because men create safety and security for those around them. Kind of going off on a tangent, but I work with a lot of guys in the dating world who would probably get labeled as the nice guy, and it's really difficult for them because they feel like they're doing everything right, and women usually respond to them very well. They have a lot of nice things to say about them. Sometimes they'll talk to me and say, I'm dating this guy. He's perfect. He's wonderful. He's handsome. My mom likes him. He's so sweet. He gets the car door for me, and I should like him, but I don't. And then they'll tell the guy this, hey, you're the greatest guy ever, but I don't really like you. And then they're thinking, I do everything perfectly and I'm not enough. Like, what's wrong with you? And then they turn around and date somebody who's, and the guy's mind much lesser than them. And it's such a frustration. It's like, why is this happening? And I would make the argument it's because they are not helping the woman feel safe and secure, emotionally, physically, mentally. Because I think that even carries over into marriage, is sometimes the man's not doing all that he can do, and he's kind of missing the mark. And I think a lot of times they come by honestly. It's not like they're intentionally doing this to cause problems. But I think another part of what it is to be a man is to have a vision. I know a lot of guys that don't have a vision. What I mean by that is, I know it's really easy to find a girl that you like, and you're just totally in love with them. You're consumed, infatuated. They're the center of your world. But that often can make a woman feel uncomfortable, because as the guy in that moment, you want to give the woman the world. You want to do everything you can for them. And although it sounds nice, it's a sweet sentiment, that's not what women really want. They don't want to be given the world. They want to come along with you into your world. They want to be on the journey with you. And so sometimes guys kind of lose that vision, and they're just making the woman the center of everything. But it's like, hey, if you take a step back and remember, what are your goals? Are you in school? Do you have a job? Are you progressing in life? Like, what are you working towards?
Whoa.
And that will show that drive, that grit. And women respond well to that, right? They're like, oh, I love that. And I hope we can get some positive feedback from women listening. They can say, yeah, that does. Because every time I've been able to explain that to a girl who's coming with a nice guy situation, I'm saying, hey, is he just like treating you like you're the center of his world? And she's like, yeah, and I don't like that, but I feel like I should like that. And it's like, no, I think that's normal. It's like, has he shown any prospects of going forward? Like, no, he's so nice, but sometimes we just sit there and he plays video games with his friends online. That's not showing any vision, right? It's just like, he's not going anywhere. And I think that there's a way for men to balance things better. And I guess my overall philosophy is, if men are better, the world will be better. I think sometimes we want to sit around and we identify a lot of problems, and it's kind of hoping that somebody else will take initiative to change it. And it's the hope of, well, I'm a man and I'm so frustrated with all the women out there. They're all the worst. Why can't they just shape up? And all the women are sitting there saying, man, men are the worst. Why can't they just be better? Why can't they be what I want them to be? Why can't they just get it? And, and in some sense, they're both right. And so I would say, if we as men, me and you and those that we get to talk and work with, take some initiative, although women have to play their part as well. They have to put their effort forth also. But if you see a problem, you got to own the problem. You can't just sit back. So I guess in a roundabout way, all those little pieces is how I would somewhat give an answer to what is a man. But I'd love to hear your thoughts on what you think.
Wow, you just dropped so much wisdom, and I want to unpack that.
Sure, yeah.
More. I love that. Women don't want the world. They want to be part of your world.
Yes.
Whoa, that is huge. They don't want the world. They want to be part of your world, which is a secure and a progressive world. It's going somewhere in a more hopeful and bright future.
Yes.
That is amazing. Yeah. And to be completely honest, that's what this is about, right? That was, I think, a big problem for me in dating is I love rolling the red carpet out and just seeing them laugh and and getting that reaction by giving them the world. But yeah, it wasn't sustainable, and it didn't maybe touch to that deeper part, is they want to know your ambitions or my ambitions, and where if they get hitched to me, where are they going? And they want that ambitious world. And that makes a lot of sense because my dad would say, women want an ambitious man, someone that's going places and that do your homework. And then,
100% agree.
and so I think that is really good, and just maybe breaking down that. That's a tough question, and I think that it demands being broken down. What is a man? And it's not something you can I think, at least I'm not at a place where I can satisfy that answer in one pithy sentence or something. But I'm going to just address the elephant in the room, if that's okay.
Absolutely.
And when we ask this question, because it comes from Matt Walsh's "What is a Woman?" and that's kind of where this came from. And his slant on this was very much engaging with the political environment,
Right.
and the LGBTQ debate, and that's not what this is about right here today. But I just wanted to say real briefly, it's important. And I remember taking lots of gender identity or gender courses. And what was helpful to me is when we're talking about this issue, it's important to look at at least breaking it down. If someone says you're gay, that doesn't mean one thing. And so anyway, I'm hopefully not going to go, this may be my last comment on this, but there's the gender bread. You can type that in and there's a cute little picture about a gingerbread man. But there's gender identity, gender expression, the biological sex, the vagina or penis, and the physical makeup of that. And then there's sexual orientation, what you're sexually attracted to, right? And so those four parts are all things that they need to be separately addressed when you go down that rabbit hole. And today is not about that that question, but I just wanted to say that maybe another episode we will, because it is part of our debate, and I have lots to say on that, but that's not for today. But kind of going into that is part of my book that I'm writing right now that I've shared a little bit with Bunker. But if you think of an iceberg, and you can see the top portion of that, which is a smaller portion, and there's usually a lot more mass underneath the surface that you cannot see. And so if you have that image in your head, what you can see, I call the external or physical world, what you can see. But everything that you can see is supported by something, the intangible or the internal world, opposed to the external world, which is spiritual. And I think that, and why is this important? Well, there is the physical manifestation, what is a man? And preparing for this, I listened to a podcast by Ben and Chad, Manhood Restored. So this is a shout out for them, and maybe even a rebuttal, but hopefully this could be taken in good jest. No offense is meant by this, and only to create conversation and deeper meaning. But the lead of that, I don't know if it was Ben or Chad, talked about how, and his particular podcast was called Fords and Facial Hair. And he talked about how when he got his Chevy truck or Ford, and he has his beard, he felt like he had arrived to some birth milestone in his manhood. And his backup singers, as he called it in the episode, said it was much longer for me to feel like a man years after I got a truck. It was when I was able to use my truck and help people that I really felt masculine. And to me, they kind of have a debate. It's very soft because they're like friends and they're talking, but there is a debate and they have very different energies. And one of them is saying manhood is the physical representation, that external world of having a beard and having a truck. And that's what it means to be a man. And the other backup singer to that was saying, no, it's way deeper than that. It's more on the spiritual plane. And it is, what does it really mean to be a man? And they got into that discussion more. And I think that's kind of what you're talking about. And I want to maybe just, I guess I have two thoughts, but maybe first, maybe I'd say just any thoughts you have on that, Bunker, before I maybe kind of go into what you had talked about, the role of being a.
Well, the only other question I thought about maybe posing along with what does it mean to be a man is how would you define masculinity, which I feel like you're kind of talking about with manhood, because I do feel like there is a difference in having the facial hair, having the truck, looking the part, if you will,
Right,
versus
that's the external world, yeah.
yeah, versus the internal of how you are, the state of your being inside. Because I do feel like there's people I know who are very masculine that maybe can't even grow a beard. They might not have a truck, but they serve a much larger purpose in the world around them, right? Much more than the guy who's got the truck who looks the part but doesn't really do anything.
Right. And thank you. That's really clarified when we're talking about this external world versus the spiritual world, because the spiritual is more important, the intentionality and, and kind of the debate, like, how do you use your truck? Do you do it to hide away from the rainstorm, or are you using that to haul out your neighbor, when they're in a ditch, that's the real man, or something like that, using their truck for a purpose. And that kind of goes into that roles. But maybe before, if I could, in talking about roles, and maybe I'll just kind of start it with, we have phrases in our English language, man up, boys will be boys, be a man, he's a man of few words, son of man, scriptural reference that Christ used for himself, and he's my right-hand man. These are all phrases, and I tried to look for the same thing about women. I didn't find as many. I don't know if I did. I didn't do like a super exhaustive research on this, but for me, I'll just throw this out there. Is the one I found that had a phrase or an idiom with woman is, hell hath no fury like a woman's scorn. Which I think is, it goes deep. I think I have some emotional response to that. But I feel like if I were to condense the quotes, and this isn't objective, so this is up for debate, this is my subjective opinion, but the idioms for men, be a man, he's the man, something, is that it connotes work or the lack thereof, maybe sexual promiscuity, something to that maybe realm. I'm sure that's not exhaustive, but that's where I'm going to take it for right now. And then women may be more of a sexual orientation. And so basically work for men and sexuality for women. And which to me, those are very different things. They're not like total opposites. And so women both work and men work, and men both have sex and women have sex. So it's interesting, but those are kind of the connotations that I wanted to bring in. You had brought up the 3 roles of a man, and those 3 P's come from the 1995, the first presidency and quorum of the 12 apostles, the family, a proclamation to the world. And I just wanted to read that real quick, because ultimately, if we really wanted to just keep this really clean, I think we would just read this article. This is the definition. This closes a lot of the debate and puts it in its proper order. So any questions we didn't answer, maybe they could be answered in this, and maybe we'll even include this on a link if you want to have this PDF of yourself. But this, this comes from the top, and it says, by divine design, fathers are to preside, that's the first P, over their families in love and righteousness, and are responsible to, this the second, provide the necessities of life, and third, protect for their families. And mothers are primarily responsible for the nurture of their children. And in these sacred responsibilities, fathers and mothers are obligated to help one another as equal partners. And it goes on, but I just wanted to say where those three P's come from, the source. And provide, I think, connotes, that's a masculine energy of work and to fix it. And preside is that about vision, which you talked about, and protect. And I was kind of thinking, I think some of our instinctual ideas of masculinity, maybe they come from society, and they definitely come from society, but they also, I think, come from the animal kingdom. And like, I think we maybe get some of these stereotypes. I think we could probably, I'm not like a zoologist or like study animals that much, but what little I know of animal behavior, especially like in the wild and stuff, like males, they fight for the female and the right to pass on their line. And some males, species, like after they mate, they leave and they're no longer part of that. And so sometimes it's like considered like masculine to like just be the pimp, just have sex and leave, And so I think some of it kind of, there are some ties to maybe the animal kingdom, but the species that have a family, like what's the word I'm looking for? Like a tribe, the males usually, at least I'm thinking about lions, they look out over their pride, they look over the cubs and they protect. And usually the female energy, which is ironic, we don't think of them, at least like in the Lion Kingdom, like presiding. It's the females that preside. And so it's just interesting that there's maybe a relationship that we maybe aren't addressing when we talk about what is a man. The animal kingdom might, be informing some of these instinctual, biological, thoughts and preconceived notions. So, and this is the kind of the last thing on that, is you kind of said, just starting out, like men are perceived in media as being lazy and dumb. And as you said that, I was just thinking, those are directly opposite of these three P's.
Yeah.
If you're going to preside, you're not going to be dumb. And if you're lazy, you're not going to be able to, being lazy and being providing are basically direct opposites. And protecting is not a lazy, you're fighting. And so though being lazy and dumb, if that's directly opposite of what our masculine role, so what we're aspiring to be. And so just that, those are my thoughts. So if I can maybe just kind of switch the conversation, in terms of relationship, why do we even care about this question? Why does it even matter to even wrestle with it? What is a man? Like, why does that even matter?
Well, yeah.
Right? And to me, what I've come up with is it has to do with how it affects your relationships. And how does it affect the relationship? Well, it's in terms of the masculine energy versus the feminine energy, which either gender can portray. And so that's kind of where I wanted to maybe, talking about relationships, that's maybe more the bulk of where I want to take this. And so I'm just going to, I have lots of thoughts, but maybe I'll just start off with a question. Because I think this justifies the why we're talking about this is, Bunker, when you've been dating women, and has there ever been a woman that has shown up in a masculine energy, and how did that affect your relationship? And I have the answer to that same thing in my marriage, but I wanted to see how that, if you've noticed that, and if so, what has been the impact?
Yes, I have. It's actually been an interesting progression for me, seeing that in different aspects amongst the girls that I've dated. Being just some different examples came to mind when you asked me that, but there's been times where, well, let me preface this. I think everybody is the way they are for a reason. And that being is sometimes girls would come, we start to date and spend time together, and she's more masculine. What I mean by that is she didn't exhibit common male traits necessarily, but she was a little more like quick to be independent, quick to push you away, wasn't as vulnerable, exhibited more common attributes like that, not so much like being like Miss Tough, I guess, like physically. However, it often caused some strain, right? Because there's that invisible battle between the polarities of masculine and feminine. And so if I'm coming into the relationship and I feel like I'm kind of feminine, we kind of butted heads a lot on little things because she's used to kind of getting her way or the highway. And when I made the comment of people are the way they are for a reason, something that I've noticed amongst the girls I've dated who have brought a more masculine frame to the relationship is have they felt a lot of instability in their life, or they haven't felt very safe or secure.
Right.
So maybe there was a girl, like I'm thinking of a different example. There was one girl, she had been sexually assaulted and had not dated a lot previously to starting to date me. And so coming into it, there was a lot of reservation, a lot of struggle there because she did not want to let her guard down around the guy. But on the other side,
right? Because her prior partner.
and it makes total sense. Like I think it's a very common and natural reaction for us to try and project the past into the future to prevent it from happening again. Like we don't want that pain to reoccur. But as time went on with her, things would mellow out and she became a lot more feminine, right? She kind of became, she felt safe, she felt secure, and things kind of balanced out again. But there's also been times at the beginning of my dating experience where I wasn't probably the masculine one. Like I kind of took the more submissive route of, oh, whatever I can be to do. I was a nice guy, right? Like whatever I can do to make this better, I'll do it. And it just caused more and more havoc because she's thinking, I feel one way, I want you to do another thing, it's not lining up. And ultimately, like those crumbled apart, the relationships such as those. But the ones where
feminine energy.
exactly. And the ones where I feel like I stood strong with myself and kind of would sit there with those moments of like, okay, she's being a little masculine right now. She doesn't feel very safe and secure. And oftentimes ask the question of like, hey, like, what is it that you want right now? Or like, hey, like, what are you thinking or feeling? And they open up and would share, or I would say, hey, I noticed that you do this. Why do you do that? And they would open up. And as they opened and shared, they felt more secure and safe, which I think depended a lot on how I reacted to it as well. Because there's a lot of shame in a lot of these circumstances. But it is interesting, I guess, to answer your question is sometimes it comes in with the masculine, and there has to be that balance of polarity. So it's like either you're going to become more feminine or she's going to fall back into a feminine frame, or you guys have to take your own separate ways. It's just not going to work.
Well, I love that, Bunker. And I think that's great self-awareness that you're recognizing. And this is a key for all you listeners, just like to pick up, like when your partner is in that masculine frame, especially as men, seeing your woman in a masculine frame, if they're trying to provide, protect, preside, like, well, what's going on? And I think that's a great question. And I think that takes a lot of awareness and probably a lot of practice on your part.
Yeah. It's kind of an overcompensation when you say that. It's kind of like they feel the lack. And so they try to overdo it. I feel like I meet a lot of single girls like that who things have not worked out for them. They're a little bit older and now they're very dedicated to their career. They travel, they have a house, they have a car. They don't need no man. And they'll tell you that. They'll say, I don't need a guy. I don't need you in my life. I just want you in my life. But they're taking on the male role as well. So I had a friend, he tried to set me with his cousin, and he told me that very thing. He said, hey, she doesn't need you in her life. She just wants you. And I was like, what's the point of me then? What am I going to do? He's like, well, you can just be at home when she gets home because she works like 60 hours a week. Like, I'm going to feel so unfulfilled. There's no point in this. Anyways, and so there definitely is something to be said about that compensation of overcompensation of just trying to fulfill the things that they're missing out on.
Interesting. And so hopefully we're being abundantly clear. If not, I want to be, is that the point of this conversation and this podcast today is what energy are you in? Are you in a masculine energy? What is a man? And I think it's really embracing the masculine energy. And that's the point that I'm really hoping to drive home today is, are you, as a man, are you embracing the masculine? And it could go vice versa. As a woman, are you embracing the feminine energy? And maybe before I talk about what that is, and just kind of, I did a little bit of research on kind of those different energies. I just wanted to maybe say what it's not. And, I think but the stereotype of a man, quote unquote man, is emotionally unavailable, dominant, aggressive, loud, violent. And those are, to me, all extremes or taken too far, opposed to aggressive, assertive. That's the balance of, and you want to be not violent or loud, but you want to you have a vision, right? And you're going to help take people to that place, but you're not going to use abuse or compulsory means. You're not going to abuse them and manipulate that, right? The real man persuades, and that's obviously with long suffering. And I think I wanted to define it, but first, we kind of been talking, just offline about toxic masculinity, and that's a term that's, I think, has recently come up. And Bunker, any comments on toxic masculinity and what masculinity is and isn't?
Yeah, for sure. So last semester, I took a class on gender studies, and it was actually really interesting. I think I was the only guy in the class, if I'm correct.
Oh, really?
Yeah, but it was really interesting
Whoa,
because as we
that is
read a
great.
lot of the material, it was kind of rough for me because they're going through the definition of toxic masculinity, for example.
Uh-huh.
And it's describing me. And I'm very aware of that as I'm listening. I'm like, this is me. But I wouldn't consider those things negative traits of myself, but I could see how they could be. And
Yeah,
so,
anything taken out of balance to an extreme
right,
is
it's
bad.
like,
Anything too much is too much.
exactly. But you can't eradicate something because you're going to need it. It's like, I'll give you an example. Like one of the surgeries I've had, they gave me oxygen afterwards because I lost a lot of blood in the surgery. And so they said, hey, but we're not giving you pure oxygen because pure oxygen is bad for you, technically. But oxygen is necessary to survive in life. So, but our air that we breathe has a mixture of components and chemicals. So I think that's a good example of there's a lot of things that make up a man, and too much of it maybe falls in the toxic category. But they're all essential to creating a good man as well. It's kind of a spectrum, right? You go to the far side and one is good and the other side is bad. But I would even go as
I
far
would
to
even
say,
say it's not one spectrum. It's being in the middle. Like
yeah,
being too strong is too strong. It's too much, or being too weak of anything is too weak. And it's this perfect balance between uh, being in the middle of weak and strong, and so.
no, I agree. I think that's a great way to sum it up. And I've often thought when I hear the term toxic masculinity, especially after this class, it almost sounds like an oxymoron to me. I'm like, this is like a double negative because it's like to be masculine is to not be toxic. So I understand what people are trying to say by it, but I think by the root definition of the words, they would almost counteract each other. Like they shouldn't coexist.
It's not a good term. It connotes this unreachable place.
Yeah,
Masculinity is bad, or but these are two separate terms. But masculinity taken to an extreme can be toxic,
right. And
or
so,
masculinity too emasculated.
yeah,
That's my joke for today. But too weak is, if you're like, don't be such a girl, like something like connoting weakness, that is also not masculine, right?
I agree. And how I've thought about it is like a scale of agreeableness and disagreeableness. Because usually men fall more on the disagreeable side. And the farther they are disagreeable wise, the more difficult they can be. And then women who are more and more agreeable are oftentimes very trusting, submissive. They're quick to like just listen and follow. And it can show up on both sides. And like kind of going back to the nice guy example that I gave earlier, is a lot of the nice guys are too agreeable. They're too quick. And I think sometimes we connect, oh, I hear disagreeable, so that means bad. And to be disagreeable isn't always a bad thing. Just as you were saying, you want a certain amount of it because you can't just agree to everything. You can't just be like water and go with the path of least resistance. You have to kind of make your presence known. But I also, as you were talking about the little sayings that we have in society, like be a man or man up or be tougher or whatever the case may be, there's a lot of examples of those where I don't know if I'd say those are always bad, because I learned that from my class on gender studies. For me, they didn't talk about this in the class, they would never, but there are moments where you can't take, as a man, you can't take time out. There's moments of high stress or high importance, or there's moments of do or die or life and death of many careers that men and women pursue, but I'd say majority of the time are men, that they can't just take the time out and say, we're going to talk this out or we're going to express how I feel. And so it's trying to find that balance, like you were talking about, being in the middle. Because there are times where I've said to guys where it's like, hey man, right now you just got the man up till we get through this. If you're out hiking in the wilderness for 10 days, you run out of water and it's like, hey, I'm sad. It's like, we don't have time to be sad right now. We got to get back to water. We can talk about it all you want, but you got to man up and we got to get off this mountain, you know? And I'm sure there's a lot of experiences for those.
Get it done.
Yeah, get it done. And then we'll talk about it, because sometimes
secondary in that context.
Right. And I think that is part of a man, is a sacrifice, right? Women sacrifice for their children. I think men sacrifice for the family as a whole, and sacrifice for the women around them. They give up their own comforts to make those around them more comfortable.
For sure. That's to me is the right relationship, or righteousness. To me, whenever I use the word righteousness, it's about the right relationship. And I think you're pointing out, it's a real man being the man is going to care about other people, right? And they put others before themselves.
It seems like society sometimes is a pendulum, right? We swing far to one side, then we swing far to the other. And it's like, no, we want to talk about our feelings a ton. Or, it's like, oh, don't ever talk about your feelings. And it's like, no, we need to be in the middle. We need to find the right time for the right place.